everybody. Welcome to another edition podcast of Far from the Tree with your hostesses, me, Jamie Dawn, and
Me, Tatyana.
we're mother and daughter duo that we're talking about anything and everything, just to give some insights and opportunity to learn. Maybe we even learn something ourselves as we're talking, share resources, and just whatever's up. Maybe this will inspire all of you in some way. And if you're just joining us, welcome. Grab a favorite beverage, get cozy, maybe go for a walk while you're listening. We do believe in body movement. It would be nice to, if I could walk and talk during the podcast as well. Maybe we can make it happen one of these days. Who knows? But anyways, welcome, T. What's going on with you?
Oh, nothing. Had a massage. It was lovely. Self-care day.
Nice. How important is that? By the way, that's a nice place to make the announcement that we're working on a special project all about self-care. So we're hoping to get that done maybe in the next month or so. We're just taking our time, letting it evolve naturally, not push it, but we're making progress. So excited
Self-care
about
and
that.
self-reflection, I would say too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important.
Kind of twofold. So things that I've learned that have helped me, that I've used with clients, things that I think are important that that you and I both think are important that we contemplate as people. You know, some of us haven't been asked the questions that we are asking. And it's important to look at all facets of our life. So
Well, as we say, at least I often say, the more self-aware we are, the better humans we can be, the better we can show up for ourselves, for others. We get to pay attention to, I'm a big evolutionary person. We get to watch the way in which we evolve. And, having that deeper self-awareness just allows us to hopefully find wholeness, because that's really what we're about. So cool. Well, I know that you have a hot topic that that we want to. It's hot.
It's hot.
All right,
I
girl.
say that with the emotional charge that comes behind it, that when I mention it, I'm sure other people feel too. But um talking about the idea of like, how do I want to phrase this? What we tolerate within relationships. What we tolerate within relationships. Certain aspects, behaviors, disrespect, pointedly, yeah, disrespect within relationships, and why we think it's okay to either tolerate it, not address it, or if we do know that it's happening, how we do address it. I think all of those are important. I know I sit with a lot of people and we talk about relationships. I know you talk about relationships, and there's no one size fits all. There's no clear-cut decision tree, unfortunately. Otherwise, our jobs would be very easy. It's a lot of nuance. It's a lot of questions to consider, behaviors to look at, looking at ourselves. Yeah.
So, yeah, why is respect within relationships important? It seems like an obvious answer, but it's not necessarily.
I have a loaded question.
Exactly.
Right. Relationships are loaded, plain and simple, for a non-plain and simple topic. Respect, why is it important? It shows us how we think we deserve to be treated, and in turn, how we are going to treat other people. I know a lot of, I'd say older generations, because I think this is an older mindset, believe that respect is given, not earned, right? Respect your elders, respect adults, respect, whoever, family members, just because of their age or their relationship to you. And a lot of us in the younger generations know that respect is earned, not given. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're a kind person and you deserve my respect. And just because you're a family member also doesn't mean you deserve my respect if you're going to treat me poorly. And if I haven't seen that respect reciprocated.
I think you're bringing up a very hot topic and a trigger point too, because if we have that mindset of you must respect your elders and all of that. Yeah, where is that line that says, okay, this elder is abusing me, or this elder is not just disrespecting, but crossing boundaries and all kinds of things? What does that really mean? If I'm respecting them, I have to take that on,
Mhm.
right? And how conditioned does that make us, especially as children and young adults, where we start getting into relationships where there is disrespect and we say it's okay because we were conditioned to respect elders?
Or
How
we're
do you,
conditioned to respect somebody because of their role.
right? Authority,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. And it's always a fine line because there has to be, I say a fine line. There's not, to me, it's pretty black and white. If you're going to be abusive, get out of that relationship, right?
Absolutely.
The disrespect, well, let me ask you this, define disrespect.
Okay. The actual definition of it in the dictionary, couldn't tell you off the top of my head. What it means to me, disrespect, is hmm, the lack of, I almost want to say the lack of reciprocity. But that's not necessarily true. And this is just me processing out loud.
Yeah, and while you're processing, I'll just invite the audience to explore that. What does respect mean for you? Because it could mean
Right.
something different to everybody.
It's not necessarily about showing interest in somebody. And it's not necessarily, again, the reciprocity of, I do something and then I expect you to do the same thing, because that's not true. And I'm trying not to use it in a sentence because when you define something, you don't want to use the same word in a sentence. Um, Perhaps more of a mutual understanding or a mutual giving and taking that is acceptable to both parties. Um, Being able to not necessarily agree, but accept and work to understand someone else and their point of view. Um, I think we look at respect something like we might tie it in with politeness or manners, which isn't also necessarily true. And I'm
Well,
kind of processing
mm-mm.
again.
Yeah, no, I think it's great because, of course, I had to look up the dictionary definition, and it's a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements, or due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. I think that one is a good, potent one, where you actually have, like you're talking about, the reciprocity, where you
Mhm.
actually are regarding, you're considering, you're being considerate of the other individual. So it's not necessarily reciprocity as far as giving and taking, it's being considerate of the other human that is standing in front of you, meeting them where they're at and
Mhm.
treating them. I like the word tend as well. I'm tending the field between the two of us as well. What there's that relational field, right? It's not just you
Right.
and me. So I'm respecting you by tending that relational field between the two of us.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned the word treating, like the golden rule, treating someone as you wish to be treated.
Right.
And unfortunately, that is twofold, because when someone mistreats us, that invites in mistreatment on our part as well, right? You're showing me that you can mistreat me, and yet you expect me not to mistreat you back. And
Right.
that goes to integrity of the
Right.
person.
Right. Absolutely. So what do you do when you find yourself, if you're reflecting on the what your definition of respect is, and somebody, usually it's the person people we're closest to, often disrespect us, that we take it so personally. A stranger disrespecting us, yeah, we're going to get our ass up and probably say something, whatever. But when we're in that pattern with another person that's close to us, that has a particular title, or whether it's spouse or it's girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, father, mother, whatever, what do you do? Well, let me start here. How do you identify it?
It can be difficult. I want to make sure we're not using like absolute language, right?
Sure.
All or nothing language. So it can be difficult to identify it, especially when you're in the heat of it, in the thick of it, in the moment. And especially when you have this concept of a person, and that relationship is, you're bonded, so to speak. Obviously, when we are outside of the situation, it can become a whole lot easier to see things, because typically, at least speaking for myself, when I'm in the midst of perhaps an emotional conversation or a heated conversation with somebody that I'm bonded with, the emotional brain takes over, even if we don't want it to, just because we end up getting dysregulated. So in those moments, it will be important to regulate ourselves and make sure that logical, rational brain is coming online. And so that's what I mean, where when we're in the moment, it can be hard to see because the emotions are clouding everything. And when we step back and we give ourselves some time and space, right? These are those conversations where like, oh, I should have said this, or I could have pointed that out. That rational brain is showing up. Right. So sometimes it's easier to see it outside of before we get into it. And hopefully when we're outside of the thing, we can practice coping ahead with, these are the things I'd like to say the next time. This is how I would like to respond if this shows up. Right? Not like worst case scenario, catastrophizing, what ifing, but when you're bonded with somebody, you know more or less how they're going to respond to something or react. And so that gives us the opportunity to, again, cope ahead with that of, I anticipate this kind of reaction. I anticipate, maybe they're not going to see my viewpoint. Maybe they're not going to understand. I know that I can't connect with this person emotionally, so to speak. So I need to keep it level with the logic and reason talk, because going any deeper is not going to be good, whatever it is. If we're able to, step back again and plan ahead, it makes it easier to do that. Having boundaries is really important. And this is a hard practice for a lot of us. And it depends, again, on how we are bonded with that person. If we have a secure attachment, and we've talked about attachment before, where we feel safe enough to express ourselves, we're not afraid of the reaction, we know we can handle it, it's going to be a whole lot easier to say things in the moment. And if they're wrong or taken wrong, however, we can take our accountability. If we're insecurely attached to somebody, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, or it can be, to set those boundaries, because the boundaries are already blurred. And so that practice is super important to do on your own before setting them with somebody, to make sure that you know, again, self-reflection, knowing what it is that you want, how you want to be treated, how you want to come across. And when you are ready to articulate what those are, really standing firm in them, because if somebody feels as though they can violate them, they will. And if you let them, they will.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's beautifully said and articulated. And I think the thing for me with the respect is that it's very reflective as well in relationships. I always say relationships are reflective, right? And that I often can compromise someone disrespecting me if I don't have respect for me.
Mhm.
So it's really important to cultivate that too. That, you matter because you have breath, you have value. Your spirit chose this body to house your spirit, and it has a right to be here. You, as that unique expression, has a right to be here. And so respecting yourself, and I'll go back to the definition in the dictionary: admiration. What do you admire about yourself? If you're not sure how to respect yourself, start there. What is it that you do really well? Maybe it's just one thing. And it's not just doing, maybe you just have a presence about you. There's something to admire, right? And so I think that's some good work to do for ourselves too when we are working with respect, or and that way we can identify as well when we're being disrespected, because also, as I always say, the truth lies in the body. And so your body, if somebody is saying something towards you and it doesn't settle right and it does trigger the emotions and all of that, like you were saying, it dysregulates you, then that is a good indicator boundaries are being crossed, disrespect is happening, that sort of thing.
Here's what I want to add on to that, because you brought up a really good point about the body showing up. When our emotional brain is taken over and we can't see logic and reason, we're going to feel things in our body. And tapping into what we are feeling in our body, because our body knows what our mind and our mouth cannot articulate, is super important. So if you're noticing a tightness in your chest or a lump in your throat or butterflies in your stomach, or maybe your hands are clenching, right? Or your shoulders are getting really high up into your ears. What do those body parts need in that moment? What are they trying to communicate with you? And if you can't figure it out in that moment, that's okay. Can you, when things have settled down, tap into what they're trying to communicate and go from there and take those messages and move into a new conversation with either yourself or that person?
Yeah. Yep. These are all beautiful reminders of things we can do. So have you found yourself in disrespectful, am I asking that question, in the relationships that have been disrespectful?
Yes.
How do you get out of them, or are you still in them? What do you do with them?
And that's where the nuance shows up. And that's where the difficulty comes in, because every person has their own values on what certain relationships should look like and on how they should function. There are, we can talk about family of origin for a second, because I think it's easier when it comes to family of choice. I think it can be easier that we dismiss those people because we made a choice to be friends with them or call them family, right? But family of origin is a little more difficult because we're born into this place. So there's certain expectations that we have of them that they have of us as well. And how do you navigate that? So some people feel as though because someone's a sibling or a parent or a grandparent, aunt and uncle, cousin, whatever it is, that the relationship should look a certain way. I need to keep these people in my life because of this role. And I think a lot of us have also been given that language of, well, it's the only parent that you have, or it's the only, they're your sibling. You should try and work things out. You're not going to have another one, so on and so forth, right? And there's that guilt that's attached to it. However, we don't use that same language with a partner. Oh, well, it's the only partner you're ever going to have, or they're your partner and you should go ahead and work things out. Well, when someone is seeing that we're getting disrespected by a partner, everyone's pretty quick, most of the time, I'd say, and not everyone, most people are pretty quick to say, you should leave that person. They're not good for you. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to get out of there. You need to put them in their place. Deep breath. But they don't say that about family of origin. We're expected to put up with that shit.
It's so true.
We're expected to put up with mistreatment and disrespect from people who gave us life, have been part of our developmental years, for the sake of the role, for the sake of the family image, for the sake of generational expectations, cultural expectations, whatever it is, but not with people that we choose. Even though the relationships with the people that we choose can be, often are, more powerful than the ones that we are just simply born into and expected to have relationships with, because that's our choice. So back to your question, how do we navigate that? It depends on what you believe in. It depends on what your values are. If your value is, yes, they're my family, I need to work it out, okay, that's fine. So now we're going to have to figure out, what are you willing to tolerate? How much time maybe are you willing to spend with that person? And these are boundaries. How do we communicate with this person? Can we look at ourselves and know what we need and know that this person either is incapable of giving that to us or just doesn't know how, and we need to ask them for it? Is there actual abuse and dysfunction? And if so, how severe is that? Is it something you want to put up with? Is it something you can talk about and address with them? Or is it something you need to see yourself out of? And I would say family of choice is the same thing. We need to be having those kinds of introspective moments, figuring out what we need, articulating them if we can, because sometimes it's not worth our breath. Sometimes seeing ourselves out quietly is the best option, especially if there is abuse in the mix, if it's too dangerous to even broach the topic. But there's, again, no one size fits all. And that's the hard part.
Absolutely. And you're bringing up so many great, great points. And I think the hardest part is the reconditioning or reprogramming of the mind when it comes to expectations and when it comes to the titling and all the emotions that go along with it and the belief systems that go along with it. I mean, this subject and what you're talking about, it is dismantling and unbinding from very old constructs that we create. And all I can say is I know for myself, it has not been an easy journey and I haven't always handled it well. Sometimes I just ghosted because I didn't know what else to do. There was nothing more I could do, right? And I didn't have the skill set to communicate that I have now. I'm talking about years ago when things like that would happen. And, I always say, one of the phrases that I say, not always, so sometimes I will say, if the relationship is more important than the subject matter, then you stick with it. You communicate those boundaries. You ask for the respect and you work with the fact that you have a choice to be in relationship with that individual or that group. But I know this is a question that the audience is going to pose. When do you know that it's time to leave? Or transition the relationship into something different?
I'm going to go back to a recent experience that I had where the body knows what the mind and mouth cannot articulate or is not ready to accept. And when you actually listen to your body instead of pushing it away, right, you might call it intuition, it tells you exactly what you need. Something that I've learned that has been very helpful for myself, and which was my great reminder in the recent experience, was I often tell clients, or I ask them, how does this person make you feel? What kind of things are showing up in your body? Is there tension? Is there tightness? Is there butterflies? How do we interpret what those things are? Do those things mean we just simply need to communicate something? Does it mean we're excited? Or does it mean that we're nervous and we're scared and something's wrong? At the same time, does that person elicit a sense of stillness or calmness or peace within you? There's no arousal whatsoever. There's no tightness. And the second is the most important part. If there is peace and stillness within you when you're in the presence of somebody, they calm you, they calm your soul. I guarantee you're probably going to spend a whole lot more time with them than you would with someone who makes you feel uneasy.
Absolutely.
A lot of us have been told, and this is true, when you're done, you're done. I think, it's very true in the sense of like, why do we keep seeing people put themselves through, I'm going to go with partnerships that they know and we know, we can see it, are not very good for them. Right? There's the disrespect, there's the lack of reciprocity, the communication is faulty, they take things personally, they project onto you, they're not willing to look at themselves, they're not willing to meet you halfway, they're not willing to take accountability. Why do we keep going back to that? Well, what was modeled for you growing up? One, in media, in the past, again, we've talked about this in the past, there was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of put downs, a lot of yelling, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of the only person that can pick on me is you, anybody else is not okay. That tough love kind of love style, which is also kind of messed up. The brutal honesty, pretty messed up.
I always love the phrase, I say this because I care about you, or because I say this out of love.
Something I saw the other day. Well, okay, so are you attacking my character, my personality, or are you looking at my behaviors? Because if you're attacking my character and personality and you're telling me something because you love me, and yet it's going to be very hurtful or harmful, you might be being brutal. And this is Dr. Raquel Martin. Thank you to her. But honesty, when you're talking about my behaviors, hey, this happened and this is how I felt or thought about it. And so I'd like for this to happen in the future. Okay, I can respect that. That's a behavior, something you didn't like that I did, not something that you didn't like about who I am. Well, I think you're a snarky bitch. Oh, okay. Well, if I already know that about myself, you're not telling me anything new. If that's not true, now you're just attacking me. And there's a difference.
Yep. Great example. And I mean, seriously, this often happens.
Mhm.
And, going back to how do you know when it's time to transition the relationship into something different? You're right. The body knows. I know that I have had relationships come and go, and most of the time it's been my decision. And it has been because it there came a point where it was almost, for me, it was a feeling of I was crawling out of my skin if
Mhm.
I didn't take some action of some sort.
Mhm.
Now, there have been some relationships that I've transitioned, and it was a beautiful thing because I was able to use skills that I had learned and all of that. And there's still friendliness between us. We may not have the same type of connection that we once had, but it was respectful in the
Mhm.
way in which we handled it. And so again, I think we do know inside of us when that time comes, and that is giving respect to ourselves too.
Absolutely. I think I know for myself, it kind of feels like a light switch where I'm interested in the relationship and then something just kind of happens. It's kind of like the last straw where I have zero interest anymore. And this has happened in the past where maybe I did my best with the tools I had to articulate how I was feeling or what I wanted to see different. And it just didn't take. And so at some point, after trying to say things that would hopefully enact some sort of change or understanding, helping to create some self-awareness in the other person of like, hey, like this is how I feel when you do this. Like, can we do something different? Repeated attempts, it just didn't take. I was done.
Well, it's like you
And
say, a mistake is something we learn from. A pattern is something we pay attention to. That's not okay.
right. So
So,
we learn to accept the things that we have been conditioned with.
right.
If yelling was normal in the household, we might see yelling as appropriate in a partnership or a friendship. If we were stonewalled or withdrawn from because someone didn't like something we did, we might see that as appropriate. If our partner or a friend does it, oh, well, this is normal. And I'll apologize all over myself until they talk to me in 3 days, and then we'll just kind of get back to normal. And again, this is why we see a lot of dysfunction. This is why we see a lot of, you know, um, abuse in relationships because people think it's okay to accept that. And again, you have the other people that see that grow up with that, and they're like, I absolutely remember how it made me feel, and I do not like that. I do not want that, and I will do differently. And probably through trial and error, they do that. And eventually, hopefully, they find someone, a friend, a partner, whatever, that can reciprocate that same kind of energy. Right. And I think for me, it comes down to effort. You don't have to be perfect in doing it, but I need to see that you're trying. Right. I'm going to change the way I speak because that's how I want you to talk to me. Right. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. I want you to talk to me this way. So I'm going to talk to you this way. And if I have a problem, I'm going to address it. And I hope that you do the same thing. If I need to apologize for something, I hope that you're going to call me out on it, or I'm going to recognize it myself and I'm going to go ahead and do that, even if it's hard. But also this
Absolutely.
comes back down to the self-reflection, the self-awareness. At some point, we have to realize, is it me? Because I'm the common denominator in all of these situations. And if so, what about me do I need to start learning from and doing differently?
And yes, and it's, you cannot change someone else. You lead by example, like you're talking about, treat them as you want to be treated. But there's also situations where you may communicate with this individual and they're not willing to look at themselves. They're not willing to change. They have no, they would rather be right than anything else. And that also is a good indicator that it's time to transition the relationship. Or again, you go back to, can I accept this? This is my choice.
And that's where it goes back to effort, right? If you're willing to make the effort, that means for me, you are willing to look at yourself and change things. I'm not going to change you. I can't do that. I can't expect you to change either, right? We have to manage our expectations. But because you're willing to meet me where I'm at and try something different, that does indicate to me that you are willing to make a change of some kind. Again, not perfection, progress.
I love it. I love it. We're going to end on that note because I know our time is up and there are other things happening in the world, but hopefully everyone gains something from this very enlightening conversation, and we can always continue it in another episode too, of course. So thank you for sharing your insights and being here. This is giving a lot of food for thought for people, and I'm sure we're not the only ones experiencing this situation in our lives.
Definitely. Thank you for
So
allowing me the space to express myself.
always, I love you.
I
Enjoy
love
the
you too.
rest of the day. Thanks everybody for listening, and continue to listen to us on Far from the Tree.
Thanks, y'all.
Transitions are an interesting threshold, an interesting moment in time that often happens. Some of them are big, some of them are small, but well, to start with, you and your partner, your lovely Talbot, made a big transition not too long ago.
A couple of them.
Yeah.